This is Sikyong La. This way. Thank you.
Yo Pegilana baby uti chino paskem ge chimucho ya pajangwe do phene andare digar ubi mi chukzu ge pandit Sikyong kungwe Penpa Tsering changare kuzap jeje kungwe namje chimucho dida pandit Sikyong ge kenu kungwa sane kuine chikyu nambe ge mimana patsamala ya ye birichidu chobe gülya tsame ge sap shije jebe Aya sabji test le shiri. Chichidong go ya tunji tunji lo la pebege ane pemi namba 12 chungsha. Di chomba di tsuya ge lo di chichidong go ya gelji lo la ya zuna sha ane dige chapchi le ya dege dusna sha. An thane chala ya chomba di na la ya chumi ya da ji sta fun dusu. Anchidangi da sanele ya bibor opsi shuwe imena piji nije bakchu ne sumya banal do si je chwebanan do ningmare akagure adira choso bege chendo gombe ge ani gilugure duksi an kono samanya bichi zongi tunde hajang ya bu choba da mima sambala ya chakbar do chuzo khane ani nedu mima namla ya tunjo ro chobala ya thande chala ya kange 동네 제시바디 찌가다 초가 매와디도 시 사송 진행이래기 아니 세종알이야 도시 표바이 두체나
토마데 consequence chulaya kujangodo tangtone 아니 다른데가 집주장배 저제 참고로 친구가 겸내기 기도인데 네 의미적 저기 반의 시경 Penpa Tsering 초 테라니시 마도디시 되게 루션 소베 줄레 레수남바 산주로데기 겐진 소베 겔레 남바 안데 산에 비만 행게래야 통만에 잠지 테스트를 쉬어야니 지금 캐나다 나길래시 지금 고참이래 오디다 캐나다리아 단대차리아 Ottawa-liya shudu-chiya di-hala, naranzi Canada Tibetan di-do-chi-che le-shi-chi go-tsa-mi-yu-yu, anda sane-la tante-cha-la-gi-se nyap-tu-ma-su, yi tante-cha-la-ya da sane-kawal-ching-ba-yi-ne chik cha-du-nyam-de-na-ya-re, huda-pa-ta-nang-ga-du, yin-ba-yi-ne da ma-wong-ba-la-ya nga-zu da cha-si-ba-yi-na-re, de riba-chi ma-ranzo nang-gi-yo-re, di-ka-la-ya chung-su-na, sane-ne 나라도 투미조라야 냠투야제 안지 산에 투미고수 냠슈남하들네 백해직 차되고 다 의를 오토바라야 맞춰 다는 못 주가야니
아니 마시고네 아고 네 저런 치 의외기 아니 배매기 개주나마시 아니 공주당 예 산에기 내일에 뭐 우리 그래 나서다 이칸도마 상호를 가샤고 주루베 거래리 안 개긴 거네 한숨이 되시래 시주기 한국의 윤주둔식 2년 제제 1971-72 내년에 자한의 수 민이 이게 뉴스가 되지 228 Tibetans were sent here to Canada. 민계 유사비지 당. 민계 유사비지 캐나다가 사람들아 말하나 돼요. 내가 쭉 Ontario State 이마이나 Ontario State showed that didn't say that values here that immigrated to Canada. That was the first lot of Tibetans who came to Canada. Okay. So the Lutes is China where Shuma Military right? And at that time, I was Speaker of the Parliament, the Tibetan Parliament-in-exile. Right? Chidu tolerate, and I'm doing current Tibet diplomats under Michiri. And Gaurumchi, Kaptidu Chibuna, Makeup there, and we accompanied His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I remember very clearly when His Holiness was in the green room of the Rogers Center, green room di Pekuna Sadhva, Kambiya Chibuna. Green room na shoot, but we must not teach how to do it. But that time, Minister Jason Kenney and Senator D. Nino. Being Kundu Jagashuni, and to do Karshus Musna, and in Jarum Chegi, and Canada, Mijik don't support us, she can not share the local chismus. It took several years since His Holiness asked the Canadian government to move about 100,000 Tibetans to Canada. In a Tandapado Tachu Matuche to look at Anamchi Porson, the Jarum Chelo Conseshua is. They said that the next day they were going to have a cabinet meeting. That was in October 2010. And in cabinet meetings, and they called Tachue is Chile, and Jarum Chile, yes, I should the cabinet not Tachue, Lochinish now, that can't the Mampuchi and the Council Mang Church Palana Yorba. They all came from Onere. Palama, one you only have to do that. That catch you chest in that. Come on, you and take a gun as usual. Can you so you do put your work? Not another day shooting at Manchurch, Tenziganche, Umdilache, any town to get the name in country to level it. Shabat and that they do me wood and the zone Calgary down. Toronto, Ottawa, this year. Moducheni, so level it. If you forget those who are good to you, and it's supposed to values a lot of what changes in Malaysia. And yet, any mixture share with that, forget the engine mixture, can't go to action. Luciani, Nezu of the Lucian Chumare. And that can't forget to in Chidan and Chusilia Tondo. And I also met the chief minister of Arunachal Pradesh. Those churches, and then the date of Jerusalem, Gomdila and Adulabra Yomari, and Tawan and Adulabra Yomari, Tawan the Gomdila Labra Manchia Jigs, Tenzigan Tangu, Amina, Nadishabazuna, Tan Udua. And Tenzigan Shijal Chashawe, and that kind of days who left the Yori, and Pigele, you want to get me a Tadivan, Egas from the Shibijan, such a Yori. In a daily, I think some people should get a rush with what. You cannot have Mutayan to church in the town, Mutayan Mount House, and pick a llama jet dead away enough, and Shumaka Gavadi Jeruda. They should do any Pigalia, Bilju, Gale, Jabu, or a Shingato, Tapu, Jabu, or a Madoji. Tenzigan, they were the Kranzo finance in Jilapche. Any Nepali Zugi, Shingata Budua. Cabbage from the I mean, teach you somebody, and Kalabu's not, you mean to Aruna challenge to the Tapavan, you should get the Budus. I do the Singapore with some others. That's not good. Doing, I do the Singapore with Sinia, and not Tavad and the Leo. Or teach you somebody, so you should the place of education, you are taking out the result of that. Singapore, the Momatan Machoya. The education, the majority in Shuman, to Sajay, Tabutama to a check, and you meet them to a connect check. Down means to dance with them, nobody getting on to trick to work. All do she do equal delay, cannot to the China yield, and some like some time where occasion will live. And cannot do about dating on Tandu Sajay, the double job you're in. And you are such a chick to do Tamatu, double Jamatu, the Yochi, and the chief English kid, and the two of the Nancy, only a fusion, a hoyo, double Jamatuna, forget the change for your Marwa, which any day, any inside the country, they will not subject, Ima Puja, Balanga, Halo Jam, there, Jagayoga. The double Jamatuna, and Nancy, we are fusion, and in a year, he is a good Valia, Miss Sajah Mewata, Total Mewata, and the Rochelle, Tingiri, and two. Shungu Mapuba in Shungu Magoshi, Saturday, Kumari. Those children. Rawa, Snow Mountain, Rawa Sieti, and Rangers Scenery, Snow Mountain Rangers, and Shingham Johnson, and having the abortions. So, how do we describe our own country? Tibet, the heavenly abode, land surrounded by snow mountain ranges. snow mountain ranges the south of Tibet is which mountain ranges? Mountain range the Himalayas. The Himalayas are the highest mountain ranges in the world. And west and Karakoram, north Kulu ranges, and east that is why we call ourselves the heavenly abode, land surrounded. Yeah, Tawan de Wadonian, Tawan and Selapas Gegudwa, Selapas Tonda Kadure, Tonda Chopsum da Dungegedwa pit at height, altitude. Hugi average altitude Hadulana about 12,000 feet above sea level. 12,000 feet above sea level. Last time when I was in Japan, I was speaking to Japanese university students and school students, and I asked them, which is your highest mountain in Japan? Japan you know it, Mount Fuji. So Mount Fuji is about 3,700 to 800 meters above sea level, or equivalent to about 12,000 feet above sea level. Mount Fuji is like base camp in Tibet. Flows into India, the Brahmaputra. Arunachal ne yungu duba Brahmaputra the ngajo kazing apega chimre pege tuting da the chinju some tuting nema Brahmaputra ma yungu yore, and it was very murky. Ngajo helicopter na to do sambala chag do na shin do chu, which means to say that there is a lot of work happening inside Tibet. It's not just for 1 or 2 days. This has been going on for the last 2-3 years, several years. That dishini pyoge chudi jagane Pakistan to yore Industan tirstangati. And Indus di pyoge Pakistan do china. Indus is the cradle of Indus Valley civilization, one of those ancient civilizations. Right? Tene pyoge chudi ma Burma la duguyore Irrawaddy le people. Mishambal teshe gyabdu sama digyab thugure and pyoge heshimbu kagasi ma hakurwa. Then what do the Asians call Tibet? Asians tinju kharla guyore pyola water tower of Asia la guyore. Water tower. Why water tower of Asia? Because the rivers that originate from the Tibetan plateau, the Sato, India, Bangladesh, and then rivers that originate from Tibet also goes into China. 2 main rivers of China, the Yellow and the Yangtze. And Yellow is the cradle of Chinese Yangtze. So you can imagine how important Tibet is. If there is no rivers that flows into the different countries, there will be a lot of problems with food. Food security, water security. Why? Because Tibet has the largest amount of glaciers and permafrost that feeds these major rivers that flows into 10 different countries. That is something you can imagine how important Tibet is for the whole region, not only for Tibet. Now the size of Tibet. Mikashi sambala pyo lede sambala druk dinashin chunjung didere samgu yorwa. Timarda pyo is very big. Tibet is very big. So when I asked the Japanese, what is the size of your country? It's almost 18 times the size of Japan. Saja Chembo, Saja Towo, Lumba Tsangma Nala Dosa Chu, Ra, the Indian Samala Pyo, the Kagas Kechumbo Imedi, Hakoduer. In the Tibetan population today is about 7 million Tibetans. Over the last 20-30 years, it has increased by 1 million. Earlier, we used to say 6 million. Kadune Pebala Tanga Hazulana, Pemi Kazoyarana, Sayatu, Sayatune Yachik Parayomar, Sayatune Machik Chayamar. That under Gamigi Tangatsi Shigutinala Tsiundu, Yanashungi, and the Mimbo Tangshir demographic survey that is Sambala, it has gone up to 7 million Tibetans.
So these are very basic information when you explain to your classmates about your, why can't you do a small program on your country as an independent nation? So that you should be able to explain to other people that Tibet was an independent nation. And at one time, between 7th to 9th century, Tibet was a large empire in present-day Uzbekistan. So that was the extent of Tibetan empire from China to Uzbekistan. So Tibet was a big power in Central Asia those days. 13th century, we developed relation with the Mongols. Mongol was a big power at that time. Have you ever heard of Genghis Khan? Genghis Khan Konyunga. So Genghis Khan invaded the maximum land in the history of mankind, from China all the way to Europe. 아니 Genghis Khan 게 가르치기 어려나? 배나 켜줘 땅 아주 땡지 강다 몸들라 가지 빼샤와이나. 몸들라 미상만 셰다 쳐줘 뭐 그러고요. So that was how ruthless and how brutal was Mongol Empire. Looking for spirituality. They had no value system. They were looking for spiritualism, and then they found Sikyong, who was a very renowned, famous Buddhist Lama of those times. And Sikyong was invited by Altan Khan. And Sikyong nephew, Khan became the imperial preceptor. So for Chinese historians, Yuan is only that period when the Mongols ruled China. But the Mongols were there even before the Yuan dynasty, even after the Yuan dynasty. Then Yuan dynasty collapsed. Mongols went back to their region. The Ming dynasty took over in China. I'm talking about comparative history because that is where the arguments come in. Chinese keep saying Tibet is part of PRP, People's Republic of China. So why do they say that? How come they say that? But we have to argue back to them. The Maris and the Maris and the so share Guatemala share mena. And meaning Marwa. Oh, those share. And Tibet during the China Ming dynasty ruled for about 300 years, from 1368 to 1644. And in Tibet, it was ruled by 3 hegemonies. Following the Sakyonpas, and Pamodruba ruled for about 100 years, Rinpoches ruled for about 100 years, Debatsangpas ruled for about 100. Qing Chinese ruled China for about Qing Manchu dige, and it ruled China from 1644 to 1911. So during those periods, Tibet was ruled by 5th Dalai Lama, 6th Dalai Lama, 7th Dalai Lama, 8th Dalai Lama, 9th Dalai Lama, up to the 14th Dalai Lama, ruled by the nationalist movement in China. So lately we all know, 19th, 20th century, Tibet was an independent country. The 13th Dalai Lama ruled Tibet. So I won't go into much details about those. That Tanderinga, Tangadu Senjuin and left there. Senjuin and left the Sambala, Canada de Yon Chair, any Pamaso Cutting, and it's so Yarum Chair Cutting, and a Pushungi Cutting, all those shit, they left there. And if you get carried away thinking that I'm just like any other Canadian, Digi Omare, because we have an added responsibility, because our brothers and sisters inside Tibet are suffering. The situation inside Tibet continues to be very, very bad. We tell the international community that we are dying a slow death. Have you heard of residential schools in Canada? You heard, right? Residential schools, native people, native children, they were all put up in residential schools, away from their family, away from their culture, away from their language. Many natives suffered because of the Canadian people's policies on native people. The same thing is happening inside Tibet. Tibetan children are taken away from their family, put in boarding schools. They are not taught Tibetan language, they are taught Chinese language, Chinese community. Tibetan children into Chinese. Signification, sinicization, what is the Ada diela yudu sambala tanda anatselur buchige tungen jal ani kananzo gena dige digi gen kur ani pamatsui ne tonante ra ani sanju labda la tayanzu kale mangmuji gyamni chegudwa you have your regular classes but then at the same time tanganzu shiru wa chela another 10-20 years after that I will no longer be here in this world ra and it's your responsibility now, every one of you. Then Tibet issue will die naturally if you don't take up the responsibility. Teaching in Kanzu Surte, they do some to talk at it, instead of hanging on some Churu, Sage, plate to Thomas Yosa. Then you will not learn anything new. That is why I invited you to sit right in front of me so that you will learn something today. All those things they don't know. And then I also tell them about Tibetan history. It's very important that we read our own history. So all the time, you have all the time to spend on your studies. So if we can become responsible leaders, then you can be much, much more better and responsible leaders in future. Kilo cheese and then the sugar. The president is made I am Mongol and making the job to law.
Now the Tio in the Tiotar is Shuini, any Chidangi, Tio Madang Winnie, Uni, Shuichik dew. So Tiotan we need to sweet the Demba, any Kushab the Demba, the Tuljaroch is Shuini.
With learning Tibetan ourselves, but what else can we do to help them? Rather than just learning our own language and dances.
That is the right attitude. So that's good. And at your age, your main responsibility, you should focus on studies. Right? So when we say studies, your regular classes, that the school that you go to, plus the weekend classes where you study Tibetan. Then you become a standard good Tibetan. And now your question is, what do we do beyond that? Right? So now you have to be in a position, you have to learn about Tibet, and you should be in a position to explain to other people about Tibet. So you can tell your elected representatives to support Tibet, funding for Tibet, political support for Tibet, and that's exactly what we do. So when we reach out to Ottawa, we meet with members of parliament. You have to study first. You have to understand more about Tibet. You have to understand more about Chinese policies in Tibet and how brutal they are being on the Tibetans. Then only you will be able to do more. Then you will understand the issues that concerns us. Then you can explain to politicians. Then you can explain to your friends about what is going on and what kind of support you need. Let's not go too much into detail.
So you should focus a little more on reading about Tibet all the time.
North Tibetan, ani so much Bangalore to Shashana, ani the Jungi, but to Antidoji, certain Yagun Sang to Kachina, the Sidang, that Kalingun, the Darjin, the Jungi, but you're there. Chima, the Jungi Twenge transition like this, Kaputani, Chola to this, Ella was some Vagina. Such a Kogyoji and citizen go Tom Yang, natural to a Kari, and Jiton, the Endoji, Tomsua, any Mount, Kisi, and Tingamaya, and Chicken, live into pay and subject, chick, any anybody that the lot of Ham Buchika, the Javashashan, Majim Mushure, in a lot of money to the Sayatuna Kari, the chick, the world there, Majin Korong is a Matan and Kari. Kalayabu, Sumotogu, and mixing is Maji Mangchilla, Yakare, Singapore, Samsung, Kalas, and Tegama, to get me able to some do.
The poor that the Ratu made this someone, small kind of chiggy. They do Naju, Naya, Tibetan, Sikyong Chache, Tibetan, Lamsan, Aletamu, and Legatangudi. Penanga, Chinanga, subdued Tampury, Chinanga, especially at Ashung, Kacho Sasha. Now the Teja Lata truth is that Chinning Hadi, Nima Lata Shaban, the Kanu Tinga Lata, Tanashi, Meodan, Tizu Lapatan, Hujo, Lapatan, Zunga, you don't chop some, you don't chudu, you don't chop gate, you are a very machine, see Lamare. And then Hama did that Teja Lata truth Hadi, doing it, Tani. Ima Luguene, Nasha Gorjaway, near Ladal to we share, near the Giloni Siji, which is the Gabalia, the name, yes, you want Jambe come there, Ladachi Shimi, Ladama, Monche, Masho, Talos to do Somalia, Talos Iman of the chair to Lutu Mama Changare, and Talos in the Puni Siji, but higher one, got to do not do. Puni Siji, the Gigin, the J is so weird. Puni Sejik did summer, Najo Pubebu Mare. Puni Sejik Nalone, Puchu Yumirisha, Puni Ladanerish. Teach you some of the Lada, Talos, Punkyo Parmedua, and a Timu Kashi, Timu the Yamda, the Pudu, Bundu race, as the Minister with Jashua Laja Gabu, you're a mirror Chinga to the Laja table, you're Puni Sejik like again, the change is so long, the Amru the Canada, or the Netherlands, Tina Shincheni, and because similar to similarly young as the Puni step get touching doing it, the Western Yoma, who's just been on it, Pubebu, you said get for Yoma. Tina Habu Man is about Habula, Poo Shigel Hasher, Tina on a Poo, Muchuma, so the Shima of Pubebu, and she was on Yumi, the air of the Yumi. And CST Masuri Shashari, Tilo Share, Digital National Yoma, and Shabas Holo, Yumita today, Abu and Luxury. And Kalimbo, Darjeeling, the Oshima, that I not feel hardship. They may investigate Malaya, the good Dania, you mitigate those who do not the little child. And Tangachi shows Laveta, Pebu Lata, Tangachi Chick of you. Mazu Pebeki, Tanga Donate, Pecumbre, how should you get up to the Sunyan up to the Shigi or the dear Tagata Lave or Sane Delia? I think when it meet the district, Tagata Taka to use yet in Lamatu, Yomarwa. Transamo Genki, chance that dinner Devi, Tobe, told me the other jobs from the Medua. I don't know, you must have a good yes to do. That we mean to do that job, which is getting daily, so it's only share like an anterior. So that is Chidoji or a Chidona, Ruche, so much, Yamduchin, Devaina, so one and Sasu in Gurua.
Question to work about the Majitan, the Bera, the Women, or the Tibetans treat the Tibetans for getting the water. The water is just also and my second question is, what are the biggest challenges are we facing for Free Tibet in general, for any politician or any general in general? And my last question would be, what advice will you give to any young generation who is trying to get into the government or any politics for Free Tibet, like in general?
Aggression is null and void. That is why we tell them, if you keep repeating this statement that Tibet is part of People's Republic of China, you are going against international law. And if international law has to be applied, Tibet cannot be an exception. It has to be applied to Tibet as well. So comparatively, if you look at present day events like Ukraine, it's the same thing, what Russia is doing to Ukraine and what China did to Tibet. 63 years ago, no, 70 years ago, it's exactly the same. But international community is coming to the rescue of Ukraine, but there was nobody to come to our rescue. This is one statement we make, that is what we tell the governments. The another statement we make is, on the one hand, you guys keep saying that Tibet is part of People's Republic of China at the behest of the Chinese government. On the other hand, you repeat this statement that we support negotiation between representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Chinese government. And we tell them these two don't go together. It contradicts each other. Because China rules Tibet with an iron hand, where there is no political space, where they interfere in every aspect of Tibetan way of life. They use all kinds of artificial intelligence enabled tools like electronic identification, geolocation, DNA profiling, even iris scanning these days. And the latest assault on the freedom of Tibetan people is the new cybersecurity law, which is very ambiguous. So you can get arrested on any issue in the name of national security. So this is the situation that is going on, right? And the whole international community keeps saying that Tibet is part of People's Republic of China. Then where is the reason for China to come and talk to us? Because that's the only leverage we have. Then the third thing we tell them is, of course, we all now travel internationally and we all know what's happening around the world. Is there one instance of one country having conquered another country and then ask the whole international community to say that this is part of us?
Yele 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 song Oh